Let's get started. And thank you so much for turning up. This is the hardcore group. So let's talk about strategic advantage at times of uncertainty. What should we measure that really matters? And we have to explain the context as well. Before we do that, I guess there is a reason why we are here now. So usually HR, L&D people, or coaches and consultants attend this webinar. So here's a question. Where do you see the biggest gap in the coaching market? Maybe from your own perspective as a coach or consultant, or as a buyer. What's missing? What do you think?
May I ask you, what do you mean by gap? I mean, in what
What
terms the gap you mean?
by gap, I mean what is missing, where you have the most potential. So if you are a coach, where is the most potential? Where do you have to double down on? Where can you have your USPs as opposed to where the market is crowded?
In my opinion, specializations or rather like differentiations of like certain coaching areas, because there is still some of them very well known, but there's still potential for it, I guess.
Would you have an example? Which one?
Like what I do is expatriation coaching, and there's not many of those who do it. It's just an example, but leadership coaching is quite, like, I would say, well known, popular nowadays. But there's still a big room for many more, I guess.
Pretty much. So this is what for example, I asked the latest Claude update because that can do the analysis everywhere. So this is what it came up with, that there's a credibility crisis in our industry.
Exactly, that's also a big thing. Yeah.
And that is a problem because, yes, people are spending more and more money on coaching. There is a lot of money in it, but the clients are growing more skeptical, not less. And the most urgent gap is more proof. How can you prove your value? How can you prove progress? The people are tired of generic frameworks and demanding measurable outcomes with clear accountability, which is really interesting. There is a gap in the market. So companies are spending more and more, but they're getting less value. And it identified 4 specific gaps that I'm going to show you very soon. Before we do that, let's check out why it's urgent, why leadership and team development cannot wait. And the reason is that the friction is rising among people and the window for intervention is shrinking. So it's getting more and more urgent. Because if you look at AI, it can automate tasks, but it's not going to be an inspiring leader. It's not going to create a high-performing team. You still need people. Then it's more difficult to get the right people and also to engage them. And robots are not going to replace them. But also, companies are going through transformation. And usually the idea is great, processes are there, but more than 70% of them fail. And that costs a lot. What is the reason? So this is the question when we talk about these things. Why is it urgent? How come there's such a big gap? Where is the proof? And this is what I want to show you. So everything that we talk about today is based on the latest insights and also our experience. So I would like to make this as practical as possible. So let's play a game. Let's make it even more practical. So if you look at the average, like a mid-sized company, this is how much they are spending on people, training and development, HR spend, and well-being programs. So that's around $4,000 per employee. That's the investment in employees. So if you look at a company with 500 employees, that's $2 million a year. So this is where we are starting. This is the money they are spending. Is it worth it? That's the question. Is it a good investment? So let's zoom out a little bit and let's check out the details. We know that people skills are the competitive advantage. We know that. But it's getting more difficult to find people. And this is one of the main reasons. So if you look at the world demographics, a pyramid shows that it's healthy. You have lots of young people and a few old people. That is sustainable. But if you look at 2030, this is what the world looks like in terms of demographics. That's Europe and that's Japan. It's a Christmas tree, which means that we are running out of people and you cannot clone them. This is the maximum and not the minimum. That's why it's physically getting more difficult to find people. But also, it's getting more difficult to engage them, to keep them, because companies are spending insane amount of money on employee engagement programs, but the engagement is plummeting. This is the US, and the blue one is Europe. That's even worse. Almost 90% of the people are disengaged at work. That's crazy. How come? They're spending money on them, but people are getting disengaged. To make it worse, they're also burning out. The burnout rate is up by 50% in certain segments of the company. If you look at young people, entry-level employees, and senior managers, up by 50% compared to the previous year. That is not good. It's getting worse. And that begs the question, how can we help? How can HR and M&D be seen as strategic partner as opposed to an admin function? How can leaders get their organization future ready? Some people say future proof, but I think that is over-promising and under-delivering. Nobody can guarantee the outcome, but we can get as ready as possible. And how can coaches, consultants, and trainers prove the value of their service beyond the people loved it? How can we link the results to what the companies understand and appreciate? So here's another question. What is the lead indicator and precursor of quality decision making, responsible for 95% of business performance? What do you think? You can put it in the chat or just unmute yourself. What is it? 95%. It would be good to know the answer to this. Any guesses? Prior disagreement? Okay. Anyone else?
Psychological safety. I'm gonna like bias on that one.
It's a good bias. It's good to have that bias. You're absolutely right. Psychological safety. Yes. Responsible for 95% of business performance. That's a lot. But then how is it possible that most leaders kind of understand that it's important, but less than 20% of them have any kind of strategies or tools to measure it or track it? They know it's important, but they don't know what to do with it. Preaching about the topic is not going to make it happen. That's not how it works. So there is a great disconnect. But there's another one, and I think it affects us quite a lot, because we become coaches and trainers because we believe in people skills. We understand the value of it. And we also want other people to feel that, yes, this is really important. But then on the other side, you have leaders. And their duty is not love, but to maximize shareholder value. By law, this is what they have to do: make money. And that's disconnect, because we want them to understand that people are important. You have to create the right environment, and they are asking the different question. How can we make more money? How can we spend less? And it seems like that we speak different languages. The expectations are different, and there is a huge disconnect. But there's a third one as well, because it is clear now, if you zoom out, that things are getting worse. The clients need your solutions, but they don't want them. What is the reason? Based on our experience, there are three main reasons. One is that they get used to everything. They have, I don't think we have an issue. My team is fine. Are they? The second reason is they think they have the solution. If that was true, the statistics would look much better. So clearly, that is usually not true. And the third one is that they are scared. They are scared of finding something that they might not like, which is pretty much guaranteed. But putting our head in the sand is not going to guarantee a solution. It just delays the problem and it amplifies it. And this is what we specialize in, bridging this gap. You don't have to choose between helping people and making money. There is an overlap. Indeed, one cannot really exist without the other one. So what if something feels right, but you're heading towards the wrong direction? And a lot of people do that. Lots of confidence, running on autopilot, spending money. I think I'm trying to save the world, and I make it worse. Once we have a label to something, it's much easier to notice them. So what I'm asking you to do now is that I'm going to explain the dark triad of future risking solutions. These are the kind of interventions that sound good, but they are not getting the results that they are promising or you're hoping for. So if you work for a company or use any tools, just try to check, do they qualify for this? Are they members of the dark triad? That's the question. Outdated and disconnected solutions, guess and hope-based solutions, and feels good but makes no difference solutions. And let me explain them quickly. The first one, they optimize something that shouldn't exist anymore. So if you look at the research, most of the leadership and management models were created in the 50s and 60s by people who were born just after the American Civil War. They were designed for the problems without internet, EU, cheap flights. The world completely changed, but not the solutions we are using. They were created when less than 17% of the value was created by humans. They were seen as a cost to contain. Today, more than 90% is created by humans, but we are still using the same management and leadership techniques. It's almost like trying to fix a smart TV with tools designed for black and white ones. It's a different technology. Trying harder is not a solution. We can see that. And also in big companies, they tend to have a lot of different frameworks. And it's almost like people are speaking different languages. Speaking louder doesn't guarantee understanding. It just creates more fiction. Different models measure different things. They use different terminology. And there is a disconnect. Lots of investment, lots of effort, not a lot of results. But the second member of the triad, guess and hope-based solutions. How do you optimize something you cannot see? So you can Google solutions, for example, and immediately you find a lot of different results, and they all claim they have the best solutions. We don't know who is right or wrong, but we can see the results. And if you ask people, is your solution useful or entertaining? Then most people would say it's both, obviously. I've got the best solutions. Amazing workshops. Everybody loves them. But if you check reality, then usually they are not that useful and they are barely entertaining in general. And this is what the MIT Sloan Management Review revealed. Because they wanted to understand how come most of the leadership programs return negative return on investment. Not that they don't work, but they cost more. They might cause more harm than good. And the result was that most of the time, people don't measure the impact on the team, on the people who matter the most. Nobody is following the trajectory of the leaders. And often, the evaluation is based on how informative something was or how entertaining it was, not how valuable it was. And sometimes they choose a program based on packaging, almost like a corporate Tinder profile. But the third one feels good, but makes no difference. This is when people mistake familiarity and the price of solution with the efficiency. One of those ideas is growth mindset. I'm not doubting that it works, don't get me wrong. Carol Dweck is very smart. She coined the term growth mindset, fixed mindset, and a lot of people teach it. And after the workshops, people usually say, my growth mindset is off the chart. First of all, we don't know. Secondly, it's unlikely. Thirdly, she says that you can have the highest growth mindset in the world. If your environment is not nurturing, is not psychologically safe, it means nothing. It has zero benefits. And this comes from Carol Dweck. So we cannot ignore the power of the environment. That toxicity is going to pull you down. And if you remember the statistics in the beginning, people are burning out, they're more disengaged, and there's less of us. There is no time to waste. So what we should we measure that matters? And when I say matters, it can be misunderstood. What I mean by that is that when it matters in terms of performance, what should you measure in a company that makes a difference? So let's focus on the three invisible forces that make or break a team. The first one is cognitive diversity, the only layer of diversity that has proven benefit in terms of performance. This is often called the immune system of a team. This is the invisible layer, the uncomfortable one. When two people disagree, what happens after that? That's exactly the dividing line between diversity and inclusion. That shows the potential only. But the benefits of cognitive diversity are not automatic. And here's an example. So imagine Ella is the boss. She's very smart. She can see clearly from her perspective. And she employs very smart people. But she's not aware of homophilic diversity, which is one of the strongest forces in team dynamics, which means that we trust and like people who are similar to us, people who have common sense, people who think like us, obviously, because this is what the brain likes. Predictability, familiarity, not disagreement, not diversity. We can say that we celebrate it, but the brain doesn't. So that means that a team can be individually extremely smart, but collectively blind. And this is not just a theory. We have hundreds of case studies. Here's an example. That was a senior leadership team of 10 people from 8 different countries. On the surface level, very diverse. Deep inside, not so much. Cognitive diversity, 22%, which means that all the 10 people are within this range. So if you look at the sliding scale as a range of perspectives, approaches to problems and opportunities, everybody's standing here, all 10 of them. So group photo would look good on a marketing material, but when it comes to strategy and creativity, it's very dangerous. We can all agree on something, but it doesn't make it right. It feels right because we are not aware of our blind spots. So technically, there are 2 main approaches to understanding people. The first one is the intercultural solutions. They explain what is normal and expected in the country. That is kind of incorrect. So if you look at up-to-date research, it's pretty clear that country of origin explains an average 2 to 12% of individual variance, which means that believing that if I learn about Germany and I understand German people, that's going to be wrong 98 to 88 times out of 100. And that's not ideal because we all belong to 15 or 20 culture groups at the same time. Country of origin is a tiny fraction of that. International knowledge is not cultural intelligence. And more than 80% of cultural differences exist within countries, not between them. If you look at research, it says that the poorest container of culture is country of origin, gender, and generation, which means that based on these 3 categories, you cannot predict an individual's values and beliefs. That has nothing to do with science. Country-specific approach is ideal for global mobility. Yes, that makes sense. Learn about what people are used to. But if your success depends on how well you understand an individual in front of you, that can be truly misleading and very costly. This is one of our case studies. Everybody grew up in Jakarta, in Indonesia. Homogeneous on paper, if you look at all the international models. But when they completed the assessment, it turned out that barely anyone is normal. And by normal, I mean somebody who is statistically average, somebody who is like the country norms. Barely anyone. You can see that they are very different people. Culture is not who we are, it's what we are used to. There's a big difference there. Culture is the norm that most people conform to. Do we know why? Often we don't. But we conform because we have to. There is another case study. A big German company employed a lot of Brazilian engineers. We had to create a high-performing team. Of course, we started with the country-specific approach, big differences. But then we go deeper. And it turned out that the Brazilian engineers were much more German inside than most Germans. And that was a psychological permission for them, that it is the right environment in terms of country and profession. And that made a huge difference. So instead of highlighting non-existent differences, we built a common ground. So on a cognitive level, it was the right environment. But the other approach is the psychometric assessments. And some people have their favorite ones, and sometimes they get really passionate about them. But the point is that they explain how different personality types tend to behave. Here's an example. Let's profile the sunflower. It's beautiful. You know everything about it. But depending on where you put it, in the middle of the snow, the desert, the jungle, or the right environment, you get very different outcome. Same flower, different environment, different outcome. We don't exist in isolation. That is the point. Your personality determines how you want to behave, but your environment determines how you have to behave. We cannot ignore it. And it can be very tiring. So you can put a lot of different people in a team, and most of them would conform to certain norms. So we don't know how different they are. But that friction brews beneath the surface. This is what global this does. This is what we are using. Somebody can take the assessment, and we go into the 3 layers of the identity. What you do, how, and why. And that's important because 95% of our actions are driven by values and beliefs we are not even aware of. Once we know that, we can use it as a starting point. We can measure the gap between you and your environment, you and another person, you and your team. And this is when leaders understand how come they try to motivate their teams, but somehow it backfires. It doesn't make any sense, even though they read a lot about different countries. Well, we are not guessing, we are measuring. And if they do it well, then you can create a high-performing team, cognitively diverse, who's able to see the same situation from different perspectives, and they can make better decisions. That is the ultimate goal. But this requires the right environment. The other 2 invisible forces. An environment has to be high on psychological safety and motivational drivers. It's not optional. This is how we can turn differences into synergy. So psychological safety is not a new thing. It's pretty old, to be honest, but at the same time, it started in 1788 when they introduced the Chimney Sweeper Act in the UK. When people were outraged when they found out that the minimum age to become a chimney sweeper apprentice was 4 years old. Can you imagine that today, sending up little babies to clean the chimney? It's not nice. So it took maybe 250 years, and now we have the same health and safety standards in most of the countries. But recently, they added a 5th category, and that's psychosocial, because they realized that an attack on the psychological safety can cause much more damage than a broken bone. But how do you measure it? How do you prove it? How do you talk about it? And how can you optimize it? It makes it difficult. But this is also business, because Google wanted to understand what is the secret of high-performing teams. First assumption, we don't need leaders. That was a silly idea. Yes, you do need leaders, but good ones. So they realized that the number 1 trait of high-performing teams is psychological safety. It's proven beyond doubt. Yet, if you ask the leaders, 99.9% cannot answer that question. How would your team score on this dimension? Would it make more sense? Then it's also responsible for 95% of business performance, and they don't know the answer to that. How can they make an informed decision? How can they optimize the team? And how is that going to affect the future of the company? Having said that, on its own, that's not enough. You also need motivation. And Daniel Pink had a really interesting idea. He talks about the evolution of motivation. 1.0, make babies and survive. That's it, very primal. Motivation 2.0, pain and pleasure principle, the carrot and the stick. And yes, it works for a while, but we get used to everything. And also what they realized is that when it comes to creativity and white-collar jobs, external motivation doesn't work. Indeed, it backfires. If you want to take it to the highest level, you have to tap into intrinsic motivators. These are the ones that are coming from inside. This is where you can create something special. Like Chris Voss said, there's no such thing as logical, only what matters to someone. And he was an FBI negotiator. So the stakes were high, and he understood that. If you understand what drives someone, then you can create the right environment around them. That's how people are motivated. So if you have a team and they score high on both, they're in the growth zone. If they score low on both, apathy. Anxiety is when there's motivation but no safety, and comfort, nothing grows there, but it feels good. There's no motivation. But Also, here's the problem. When we talk about the topic, it's easy to dismiss it as a subjective opinion. But when you quantify it, then you bring it alive. You make it tangible and real. And that's exactly what we can do. But we also know that the numbers can lie. You can see that as an average, the team is in the growth zone. We could walk away happy. But if you look at the individuals, you can see how polarized they are. And this is the question. How is it possible that within the same environment, under the same leadership, some people are like fish in the water and others feel rejected and demotivated? What's the reason? We have no idea. The assessments cannot tell you that. They can provide data, but the insights come from the people. But it can also affect lives. We had a case study in Scandinavia, oil and gas company. Everybody, the senior leadership team, including the CEO, scored in the apathy zone. During the program, one of the refineries burned down because it affected health and safety. But on a positive note, the biggest mining company in Indonesia, 6 months program, they had 17 accidents a week, according to the company itself. And 6 months later, they had 0, and they won the most prestigious awards in this category. They turned psychological safety into physical safety. It's not charity, it is business, and it's affecting lives. So depending on how the team score on the 3 invisible forces, they can be in the growth zone, which is fantastic. It can be the time bomb. When you have issue with one of them, if you find it, you can diffuse it. If you don't, then there can be a problem. Decline when you have a problem with 2, and game over when you score low on all 3 of them. So the very logical question, where is your team? How do you know? Where was your team before the program? Where was your team after the program? And I can tell you that most people cannot answer that question, which would be critical, especially now when there's so much uncertainty around us. How can we make decisions that are costing a fortune without relevant data? If we cannot justify the ROI, how's that going to help? So why is it critical to measure what matters? And this is a strange example, but it's also real. So when I saw that the battery was low in our car, then I thought, let's be a real man, and I'm going to charge it. Because now I know what to do. I Googled it, so I was up to date. Charged it all night. In the morning, it's even lower. I said, that doesn't make sense. So I called my brother, who actually knows what he's doing, and he asked me, do you know that you have 2 batteries in the car? I said, no. And this is exactly the one that I cannot charge. That charges when I slow down. I said, okay. So my point is that I put a lot of effort into fixing a problem that wasn't the real issue. That's exactly what a lot of companies are doing. They think they know what the problem is. They think they have the solution. But if you don't know how to measure what matters, then maybe you optimize something that shouldn't exist anymore. Or you solve a problem that is not the real issue, like I did. Or you struggle with proving the value of your work and the ROI of the program. Or simply you endanger the future of the company while trying to save it. That's why it's critical. So within the 3 invisible forces, you also have the 9 biomarkers directly linked to engagement, profit, and growth. And that's exactly what the companies are interested in. That's what really matters in this context. But when I asked ChatGPT last year, how would you ruin a company? It came up with 6 steps. The first one, suppress psychological safety. Evil robot. It destroys courage, vulnerability, inclusivity. Step 2, micromanagement. Forget about trust. It undermines autonomy and accountability. Choose your favorite people and forget about equality. We don't need that. Step 4, undermine growth and development. We can see that happening now. Short-term gains as priority. Forget about purpose, long-term plans. Be reactive, short-term thinking. And the last one, poor communication. We can see that. So these are the 6 steps how you could ruin a company. But the interesting thing is that we work with hundreds of global companies, and we've done hundreds of team scans. And the results were exactly the same behaviors, most of them. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you do it intentionally because you want to ruin the company, or you do it because you don't know about this topic. The outcome is the same. You're hurting the biomarkers of high performance within your team while thinking that you're doing the right thing. That's the problem with that. It's exactly the same thing. That's why guessing is not ideal. But like I mentioned, you don't have to choose between creating the right environment, helping people, and making money. This is a case study. Fortune 500 automotive global leadership team. Managing thousands of people. Not ideal. They are in the epileptic zone. That was the diagnosis. 6 months later, they were here. Not everybody was in the growth zone, but most of them. And we improved psychological safety by 30%, motivation by 25%. All the biomarkers got better. Some of them became a bit more polarized. This is the level of transparency that we can provide. Based on this, you can adjust the program, you can adjust the investment, and you can find a better solution. You cannot offer a solution without diagnosis. That is unethical and unprofessional. And I think this is the reason why companies need to raise the standards as well, just like we do as coaches and consultants. Because AI is going to replace a lot of coaches and a lot of training programs and short courses. But I think there's going to be much more demand on a premium level, which is data-driven, customized. It's not based on other people's problems, but on your situation. So probably something in the beginning, when I asked Claude, where is the biggest gap in the coaching market? And it identified 4 specific segments. First one was the measurement gap. The largest unmet need is the absence of rigorous pre- and post-measurement in coaching. How do you measure the progress? Most programs operate on anecdotal feedback, self-reported satisfaction. But what companies are looking for, what changed and by how much? Can we provide that answer? Or it's enough if people enjoyed it? The second one was behavior versus skills gap. So if you look at the market, a lot of companies are offering skills training, communication, feedback, time management. Yes, all of them are fantastic. But what is the point in having all those skills if under pressure, you're not willing or able to use them? Then it's like not having them. It's even worse because you spend money on the skills and they're not using them when it matters the most. And then you're just competing on price. So the high value defensible territory is in diagnosing and shifting invisible drivers that are directly linked to growth, engagement, and profit. The third gap, the cultural intelligence gap. So we know that we live in a globalized world. We know that it's important, the cultural intelligence. Lots of people talk about that, not realizing that they talk about international knowledge. Or they get lost in psychometric assessments. And all of them are important for a specific purpose. The problem is when people misunderstand them or they misuse them. Because if you're not aware of this, then you're going to misdiagnose the source of the friction. And if you cannot identify the root cause of the problem, then you can only address the symptoms. And we can see the result of that. And the last one, scalability. So the fastest growing segment is digital AI-enhanced coaching. But the biggest platforms sacrifice depth for scale. They're competing on delivering the same thing more quickly. Depth is not important. It's about numbers. So if you have a scalable data-backed model that doesn't dilute quality, it's fantastic. If you have an AI coach to enhance your practice, that is great. Because I think AI is going to replace a lot of low-level coaches and trainers. But premium level is important. And that's exactly how we work with Gloria, for example. She is our game changer AI coach. It's not based on generic advice from other people. It's based on your assessment results and our methodology. So for example, I asked Gloria to show me how she looks, and this is what she came up with. So that's from her. She is Gloria, so we have to use this because we don't want to pretend that's a real person. Gloria is a wonderful creature. So this is part of it. So if you look at, for example, the 4 segments, the 4 biggest gaps, you can see how we adjust all 4 of them because we have to raise the standards. It's not optional. The world is changing. So the only way to provide more certainty is by providing more value. And guessing is not going to do that. Not being able to prove the ROI is not going to do that. Not good for the clients, not good for the coaches. So if somebody wants to be part of this, you can be. We have certification twice a year. The first one is coming up in March. 4 days of goodness, ICF accredited. We won several awards as well. It's going to be difficult, intense, but also fulfilling. You can see that there's a lot around it. It's online, on Zoom. You don't have to travel. You don't have to waste time. 4 or 5 hours, around 20 hours altogether. And then you're part of an awesome community. No annual fees and things like that. Your success is actually our business model. If you need any more details or you would like to have a summary of the slides, then I put my email here in the chat. Drop me an email and I can send it to you because I know it was a lot of information, but I thought I would share it because we made a lot of mistakes and we had lots of success as well. And if you can learn anything from it or you can share, then it's fantastic.